Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Let me tell you, y'all look mighty good. This is, I know people probably thought I was really corny. I was like, look at all these people. But I'm glad you're here. You could have been anywhere. And we appreciate you for taking your time and being here to share with all of us. So I'm not going to talk a whole lot because I know you want to hear from our author. So we're going to just jump right in. Let's start with the titles. Hold your book up too. Aren't they pretty? We're gonna get excited. The Summer I Ate the Rich and I'm Made of Death are both provocative. What drew you to these titles and how do they reflect the core of your narratives?
You want to go first? So, I don't know how we first had that initial idea, but when we decided to write our third book, I was like, it should be called The Summer I Ate the Rich. And Miko was like, ooh, that's good. Yeah, let's do that. And even as we started to develop the idea, and we had a girl named Brielle, and she was into cooking and all of that stuff, something still felt like it was missing. And then Maika was like, what if she literally ate the rich? And we're like, yes, that's what we need. And then Brielle became a zombie, and our story came together.
Yeah, there was also, we started thinking about this story during the pandemic when, everyone was thinking about eating the rich, I guess. But NPR had reported on this young lady who was receiving phone calls that were meant for Elon Musk. Somehow she had gotten an old phone number of his, and a lot of people were reaching out to her thinking it was him. And so we were
Because he was still giving out that number.
Because he was still giving out that old number. Yeah. And so we were like, oh, what would happen if, our main character also has a situation like this where she's getting these phone calls and text messages that are meant for someone who's very, very, very wealthy. And so that was a part of the original idea that then helped us to come up with the name, The Summer I Ate the Rich. And it all came together when we were like, what if she literally ate the rich? And and it allowed us to really delve into that with the Haitian zombie lore, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little.
That's the opposite of my process, in which I tend to title the book some random vibe that I'm going for, and knowing that I will then go through later, once the book is finished, and sort of look for a line that seems like it's pulling the theme out of the story. And, that's for The Whispering Dark and Your Blood, My Bones are both lines in the book. And this is sort of followed the same trend. I Am Made of Death is a quote from a character at a pivotal moment in the story. But it is also, if there are any Broadway nerds in here, like myself, it is also a line from The Phantom of the Opera. And I knew that I wanted to write a story. Vivian, the main character, is a ballerina. She's lived her life on the stage under the spotlight. And I wanted to sort of write a book that played with some of the themes of disability and otherness that we see in The Phantom of the Opera with the glossy pink pastel life of a ballerina. So it sort of tied those two together in a way that let me put a little Broadway Easter egg on the cover.
Yes.
Yeah. I didn't even know about the phone. Really, that was a real thing. I thought you all made it up, and I thought it was
Wild
brilliant.
story.
Yeah.
Some people will read it and they'll be like, that never happened. And we're like, no, it really did.
That's wild. How would you, because you already touched upon it a little bit, but how would you all describe your book in one sentence for those who haven't read the book?
We practiced this. So, thank you. Okay. 17-year-old Brielle Petitfou, who happens to be a Haitian American zombie, decides to unleash revenge on the very wealthy elite who she blames for her family's pain. I said all of it. I am sorry. Love it. She got it.
Well, that's good. It's a tough act to follow. I have to condense it all down to one. So I Am Made of Death follows a college dropout, Thomas Walsh, who is a child of a deaf adult and sign language interpreter. He takes a job working as an interpreter for Vivian Farrow, who has not said a word aloud in 14 years because when she speaks, people die.
That's good.
Yeah. If you haven't read their books, I'm so excited for you because these books are rooted, and we're going to talk about it, in the horror genre. And when I was first named for this panel. I said, do you not like me? Like, yeah, y'all know I'm a scaredy cat. I can't watch scary shows at nighttime. Past 4 o'clock, I'm not watching it because I get so scared. So could you talk about why did you pull from the horror genre for your books?
For me, I have a background in social work, and I worked with clients who were going through, trauma as a trauma counselor or grief counselor. And when I pivoted to, trying to write a book when the pandemic first hit, and I was a new mom, and I was like, maybe I could make this author thing work. This is the time to strike. I wanted to sort of carry over what I was doing in my last job into literature. And some of the best advice I ever got was from my supervisor, who told me that a vehicle, driving in a car, is the best place to have the hard talks because you're not staring someone down. And so I would have some of my deepest, most meaningful talks with clients going through a trauma in the car, on transport, to home, to school, to meetings. And I felt like, as also a coward who doesn't like horror, but who loves the idea of horror, or who reads all the horror synopses on IMDb, I was like, this is such a great a vehicle for me to use to talk about grief and loss and going through those sort of changes, but with all of the tropes that keep me up at night. And so for me, it just was an easy way to marry the two things that I love most, which is working with teens and the spooky stuff.
Well, thank you.
This comforts me because Marissa and I joke and we're like, we don't know how we started writing horror because we are scaredy cats.
We all are. That's what gravitates.
Yes. But I feel like for horror, it's such a special genre because you are really tackling some of the scariest things that we might experience in real life, but safely on the page. And for The Summer Ate the Rich, there was this opportunity for us to really lean into the Haitian zombie lore. So if you don't know that, the idea of the zombie originated from Haiti, and it was essentially the fears of the enslaved African people who were forcibly brought from the continent to the island, that their servitude would continue even in the afterlife. And so that idea of the undead is rooted in working even in death in perpetuity. And so when the United States occupied Haiti in like 1915 for about, I think it was 20 years or so, the idea of the zombie made its way to the United States or to the West and became the zombie instead of zombie, how we say it in Creole. And of course, it was very much changed in the way that it was originally meant, in the way that people thought of it on the island. And it has become this device, the zombie, to talk about like overconsumption, pandemics, all of these things. And so for us, we wanted to root it in Brielle, who is a zombie, who is afraid of this idea of, she's the only of her sisters who lives in the United States. She has 5 sisters who are in Haiti. And so she feels this immense sense of responsibility for making sure that the work that she does here can allow her to send money back to Haiti. And because Brielle is a zombie and her mom works for this very wealthy elite family, there's this idea of if Brielle is the zombie and she's working for these folks who have all this money, who is the real monster here? The person who wants to eat your brain, or the person who has the amount of money to cure world hunger, but they hoard it for themselves. And so horror was used as this device to kind of create this mirror, if you will, for the characters.
Yes, and Brielle is Haitian through her mother's side and American through her father's side. So we decided to incorporate both aspects of the zombie and the zombie to make her, very strong and hardworking, which was the background of like the Haitian zombie. And then she also happens to love eating brains, which is how the zombie evolved in Western culture as well. And like, as we've mentioned, horror is this amazing playground to talk about these truly scary things that happen in real life. And you can always debate between what truly is more terrifying, the guts and the gore and the blood and all that. It is scary, but also the way that we treat each other as a society and individually, also scary.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Capitalism, death, identity, the role of being caregiver, these are big ideas that you all talked about in your books. So how did you approach these big ideas? And then were there moments when the story took you in unexpected directions?
I would say, to start with the last question first, I don't know about either of you if you guys are plotters or pantsers, but the whole story took me in an unexpected direction because I sort of go in with a thought and let the story percolate over time. And so I knew that I wanted this idea, I wanted to play with the idea of language deprivation and lack of language access. I'm deaf, and although Vivian is not, she exclusively signs, and in her very isolated insular world, people are interpreting for her in ways that are manipulative and give her a voice that she doesn't necessarily want. And I wanted to sort of play with that idea of how someone can be controlled through their speech and what it would look like to take that back. And I knew going in that's who she was. I knew that I wanted her to be sort of a femme fatale. I love Jennifer's body. I wanted her to, burn it all down in that sort of a sense in her quest to take back autonomy. And what the rest of the story looked like sort of informed me as I went. I'm a very character-driven writer, so I think the rest of the book was born from there. And I definitely wanted to play on, healthcare, and Vivian in the book has found, as we all do, we turn to Reddit for answers at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
And she has done that, and she has found a surgical resident who thinks that he can perform a surgical exorcism. And it's just him posting at 2 a.m. also, but she's like, you're going to do this for me, and I'm going to find blackmail on you, and I'm going to make you do it. And it sort of talks about the idea of, body modification and surgery, and the idea of consent to, having your body altered by science, or, and I really wanted to play with sort of the body horror of that. I had cochlear implant surgery, which was very difficult for me as a kid, and I dealt with a lot of issues stemming from that after the surgery. And I sort of wanted to play on that feeling of, fixing yourself when you're sick, or just living as you are and accepting who you are. And it's sort of all informed as I went, and as I went down pulled on that thread of what it would look like if, instead of having a priest with holy water come around, you had a med student who doesn't know how to insert an IV.
Also terrifying.
A recurring motif in The Summary of the Rich is this beep. Brielle's mom was injured at work and has very intense back pain. And that was pulled straight from our own family experiences. Our mom, who just came. Hi. She has very bad back pain. It's very sad. And in the past, there have been moments where, like, there's a health insurance issue and the pain pump is empty, and it will beep every hour on the hour to remind the person that their medication is empty, as if they themselves are not aware of the pain. And it is just a very stressful, intense sound that we certainly ratcheted up in the book. Brielle was hearing that beep every 10 minutes, just in her mind all the time. And we were certainly inspired by the frustrations of, like, real world health insurance issues that come with living in this system that we're in. And then also throughout the writing process of this whole story, our father was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and subsequently passed away. And dying is very expensive, extraordinarily so. And all of those things were just, like, wrapped up in this writing of the book. Like, we're always like, we don't know how we did this. Like, it was just kind of like in this fugue state. We just kind of threw everything that we were dealing with into The Summer I Ate the Rich. And yeah, it was just a lot. Like, these were real life experiences that can certainly end up, being things that you want to explore deeper in a fictional context, because we aren't eating rich people.
Yeah, I think as well, for us, when we decided we were going to write this story, we knew that it would be rooted in this, critique of capitalism or labor and what it means when you are the worker. But because we were going through the reality of, our father being sick and then, eventually passing away, there's a lot of grief that Brielle is navigating throughout the story, which we did not know when we were, setting out to write the story, that would be an unpacking that Brielle would be doing. And so, like, as, you go through life and someone gets sick, there is this, like, pre-grieving that occurs if the person doesn't pass away suddenly, and you start grieving in advance, even though the person is still here. And so there was a lot of that Brielle is forcing herself to not experience, because the story starts off and her father has already passed. And so there was a lot of grief that is embedded within The Summer I Ate the Rich that we didn't know, and it kind of appeared throughout the story. And something that Kelly mentioned is, like, if you're a plotter or a pantser. And so for the folks who don't know, a plotter is someone who you write everything out. You're like, here's a very extensive outline. And then there's the pantser, which means you're writing by the seat of your pants, or as I like to say, you let the spirit move you. And I was a pantser and Maritza was a plotter. But in order for us to walk together, I have had to become more of a plotter. But funnily enough, Maritza will want to pants sometime, and I'm like, no, we got to outline that. So it all come together in the story.
You said, can you hear me? Okay. You said something about, like, the pre-grieving, and then just thinking about, like, how expensive death is. Like, my mom passed a couple years ago, but I was telling another friend whose mother just passed, I said, the business of death
Yes.
is overwhelming. And you just go, you have to do this and that and that, and you think you have everything in order.
Yeah.
And then when it finally happens, you're just going, I have to add this to the list. So then I got mad at, like, the health insurance system
Oh,
and so many things, but we won't talk about it.
That's why I wrote the book.
That's why you gotta read the book. But was there a chapter or a scene in the book that was particularly cathartic or just an exhale as you were writing it?
I think I had the scene that was the most cathartic for me was also the hardest to write. Just, I think in terms, I think horror, I don't know if either of you have run into this, but I think it's hard to be scary and funny on paper. Like, it's hard to make the jokes land, but it's also hard to make the horror land. You can't be too heavy-handed. You can't also pull it back so much that the reader is just lost and doesn't know what's going on. You have to sort of do that ambiguity, that moment in a horror before you see the monster.
Yes.
And it's lame CGI, but when you start letting the reader develop their own ideas and scaring themselves, and it takes a while to get that. So I think that the scene that I'm going to talk about was difficult in that sense. But for me, I love, a scream queen. I love. I mentioned Jennifer's Body already, but I love that moment where a character who is going through whatever the horror may be takes back control and just has, like, a Carrie moment.
Yes.
And so there is a moment in here, Vivian tries very hard not to speak, because obviously when she speaks, it leads the person hearing her to die horribly. And that's a lot of power that she wields, and she's been forced to take out some people that perhaps she would not have, and so she's carrying a lot of that. But there is a moment where she is tired of being pushed, and she unleashes and just starts talking, and it starts with a simple hello and then goes on from there, and people start dropping like flies. And it's a moment that was cathartic to build to, because it's when she stops worrying about fitting. I think, for me personally, I was not taught sign when I lost my hearing. I was told, you'll be behind your entire life if you don't learn how to, read lips and fit into a hearing community. If you sign, you'll be behind, you'll be isolated, you'll be excluded, you won't make friends, you will be lonely. And those were a lot of lies that I think we tell people who lose their hearing. And I used to be so angry at that, like I had to shave myself down and force myself into this box in order to, make everybody else comfortable? Why doesn't anyone try to make me comfortable? And so Vivian had that moment in the book where, okay, I'm done. I'm done tempering what I say. Good luck to you. If you're here, you're here. And that was really cathartic to me, to put a little bloody, a little campy, a little, scream queen horror moment. But it was kind of nice to put it on paper and to try to make it bone chilling as I want it to be. That was tough from a craft level. So.
Go ahead.
Okay, I think I really enjoy the moments of writing, just like those passages where Brielle is talking about cooking, but she is doing it in such an explicit way. Like, I think the first line is like, my favorite part has always been the blood or something like that. And she is getting into like all this gross stuff, but she's just cooking some beef brains. And it's very delicious. But like the way that she talks about it, you hear the yearning of like her wanting to like really not be eating a cow. Like she wants to be eating someone else's brain. And like her mom is like, oh, Brielle. So like that is fun to write. And I love that you mentioned like the idea of exhaling. Like one of our author mentors is Evie Zaboy, and she's awesome. And yes, exactly. Yeah. And she talks about like writing inhale books and exhale books. And like an inhale book is like, you have to take like a really big, deep breath when you write it, and it's like heavy and weighs on your chest, and it is hard and deep and all that. And then an exhale book is just like a nice breeze that just kind of like, you just exhale it out and it's easy. And we haven't meant to do that explicitly so much, but like we've kind of been like exhaling, then inhaling, then exhaling, then inhaling. And like The Summer I Ate the Rich was definitely an exhale book of like, what kind of shenanigans can we get this zombie girl into?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of something cathartic that isn't a spoiler. Okay, so I guess, so growing up in a Haitian household, at least with our mom, let's say that, maybe it's not all Haitian people, but our mom, she would always speak in parables, it felt like. So we'd be like, oh, you don't know until the crow croaks 12 and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, what are you saying? And so it was very fun for us. Like, none of our stories take place from like, oh, this is the beginning, this is the middle, and this is the end. There's always some like, well, you need a little bit of context. So in our story, Brielle has this, her Greek strike that Haitian chorus, which is her 5 sisters that are on the island. And so there are these moments throughout the story where they're giving you background about how Brielle became a zombie, what is the zombie in the Haitian lore, and then they give you the background of the mother and what decisions the mother made that made Brielle ultimately become a zombie. And so those moments were very cathartic because, Brielle is kind of like, I don't know, the average age of our audience right now, but there's this show called Daria. There's a show called Daria, and the girl, she was very deadpan, and she just always talked like this. And so Brielle very much gives that like, yeah, I smile, but it doesn't reach my eyes. And then, and then her sisters are like very poetic because we're taking it from like the
muses
from and they have all of these elements of like there's someone who's dance and poetry and all of this. So that was very cathartic because, as you can see, I'm very emotive, and so being able to channel that into the sisters was a good outlet.
Thank you. I just want you to extend this, some of your thinking that you've already said, but do you have any specific music, art, or cultural influences guiding you as you write? I know like Scream Queen and Jeffrey Jones and the Haitian lore, but anything else that you pull from as you write?
I'm a big Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan, and I feel like people can tell when they read my book. But I feel like she fits kind of into the, this is bubblegum horror, and which is very pink and poppy, and everything's glossy and pretty and girly until it's not. And I think that Buffy Summers fits into that.
Yeah, that's good. Daria, I guess like these days it's like Wednesday Addams, that type of vibe. I'm very boring, and I have to kind of have silence when I write because it's like I'll come up with words to the music, but they're not real words. It'd be like dun 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 dun. It's very distracting. So yeah.
Yeah. So when we were writing The Summer I Ate the Rich, we actually did some research. So one, we asked our mom, our grandma, and our dad. It's like, we did do that. So we asked our mom, our dad, and our grandma, like, oh, tell us about the zombie when you were growing up. How did you know if someone was a zombie? So we got that, like, ethnographic, because we're also nerds. I don't have my glasses on right now, but we also had our ethnographic experience from our parents and our grandma. And then we also read like academic journal articles, because there would be different people, sometimes doctors, who go to Haiti, and they talk about how this idea of the zombie is manifesting in this community, and how there was someone that they treated and the symptoms that they exhibited. And then we also wanted to read how Black authors, use the zombie within their work. So we read Colson Whitehead's
Zone 0?
Zone 1.
Zone 1. Yeah.
Yes. And so we read that. We read this duology by Justina Ireland called Dread Nation. It's so good. It's so good. And then we also read from Zora Neale Hurston's Tell My Horse, where she does this ethnographic study of what she calls voodoo in Haiti, vaudou in Jamaica and Haiti. And she talks about like her experiences witnessing, people become zombies, evolve into zombies, and running into them. So we had a little bit of a, like the firsthand with our parents, academic, and then reading other writers, and then we came up with our own.
Good answer. Very good. Yes.
Beautiful, beautiful. What kind of reader do you imagine or hope will pick up your books? And then have you been surprised by anyone who actually has, not actually, but has read your books?
Someone who is interested in people thinking deep thoughts, but also witty thoughts, and who are open to considering like what would happen if someone makes the bad choice. My sisters and I were always talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender, and like we love it. We love Aang, blah blah blah. But was the solution? I'm not going to spoil it. Maybe we needed a little bit more violence. Maybe we needed some more retribution.
The camera's like, good.
I'll just leave that there. But like, what happens if in this story a girl gets to make those really bad decisions? Maybe the ones we wouldn't encourage our kids to make typically, but like maybe someone needs to make them. So yeah, someone who's interested in those those morally gray scenarios. Someone who is a horror baby, I think we treat you well.
Yes.
It's a nice experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
And baby meaning you're just getting into horror.
Yes. And also baby. Yeah.
I would also say, to answer the other question of like someone who surprised you, so they had a very fancy cocktail party for the authors yesterday. And so we ran into Jerry Craft, who writes like amazing, wonderful books. And so I go up to him and I was like, hi, Jerry, I'm Maika. He's like, I know. And then I was like, this is Mercy. He's like, I know. And he's like, I'm listening to your audiobook right now. And we were like, oh. So that was very fun to have someone who we were just like, hi, we're trying not to be really weird, but we still are. And he's like, I'm reading your work.
I also think this is good horror for babies. I think that's the channel, horror for babies.
Yes.
But I do think that, it's a good entry gateway to horror in that it's not explicit horror, but it's got the vibes are there, the aesthetic is there. And so this at its heart is a mirror horror, and one of the motifs in the book is that in any reflective surface Vivian looks into, she sees a monster staring back. Mm-hmm. And in her case, it's literally the force that is inhabiting her, that she's trying to exorcise, is staring back and talking to her. But I do think that anyone at any time, especially when you're younger, has looked into the mirror and seen a monster staring back, whether it be, you have a big zit that day and you think everyone's looking at it, or whether it be something bigger, something you're made fun of or you're self-conscious about, and I think that anyone at any age has felt that sort of self-consciousness that Vivian feels. And for her, it's all-consuming and something she's trying to cut out or come to terms with. And so I take you on that journey a little bit.
Yeah. as I told y'all before, I get scared of anything after 4 p.m. But these are, I like how you call it baby horrors, because I told them, I said, there were some scenes I had to shut the book down. I was like, hold on. All right, let me get back. But again, as I said, I'm excited for you all if you haven't read the books. But thinking about the context, because soon we're going to be doing Q&A, but both of your books feel very now. So I'm wondering a couple things. Why did you write this book? Like, why did you put it out to the world now? And then how do you see it fitting into or pushing back against the current cultural and literary landscape? Like, why the book now?
Yeah. When we wrote it, we wrote it for all the reasons that we talked about. And then when, someone went and killed the CEO of a major health insurance corporation, it has been interesting to see the lionization of that. And I mean, writing this book from the perspective of a girl who is trying to seek revenge, and she's not just a girl. Like, we're thinking about our intersectional identity. She's Haitian American, she's Black, she's living in America. Like, she's a zombie. Like, these. Oh, she's poor. I didn't know what you were saying. Yes. She's poor. I'm like, what did she say? Yeah. She's poor. Like, all of these things are coming together. Like, would she have had that same type of experience, if you will, if she had assassinated a CEO of a health insurance company? Probably not, And these are part of our experiences, so we're always going to be writing about these identities that we have for so long not been exposed to as young readers. We've come such a long way in the publishing industry in terms of diversity and inclusion and what's available for folks. But I love being able to present a book like this, a girl who is morally gray, who is making these, sketchy choices. And anyone can read it, and hopefully, you could see it. This is where I'm going to talk about Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop. Yes. So, there's this literacy scholar who talks about books being like mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. Sometimes you look at a book and it's a mirror, and you see yourself and you're excited, and then other times it's like a window for you. It might not necessarily be that first identity that you see yourself in, but you're learning about someone new. You're starting to understand that person more. And then, it could be a sliding glass door of you taking that journey with the character as you're reading through the books. So being able to create a mirror or window, a sliding glass door, in each of our books is just such an honor for me. Yeah.
Me too. I would also add, because life was happening, our father got sick as we were writing the story. This book actually came out, I would say, 1.5 to 2 years after it was supposed to come out. So the fact that it feels very now, it didn't happen that way. Because if it had come out according to the time when it was supposed to come out, it would have happened already. But I think there's something, to my point earlier of Maritza and I never really writing a story that's this is the beginning, this is the middle, this is the end. There's always backstory from a parent or history that adds context. Everything in time, time is a circle. Things happen over and over again. And we have the opportunity to use history as a guide and help us to make better decisions than the people who came before us, right? And so with The Summer I Ate the Rich, it feels very now, even though we wrote it so long ago. And someone could argue, even with Octavia Butler in The Parable of the Sower, so many people are oh my gosh, she was telling the future and all of these things. It's and she mentions this, she wrote it based off of her observing the world around her and imagining what would happen if things continued down this path in 20, 30 years. And so it's not that it feels now. It's now is always now, right? Someone could read this book 20 years from now and still have things that resonate from them. That's why people like to go back and watch their favorite show again. Read your favorite book. There's always something from your current experience that you are able to find within that story. So I think it's not that it's now, it's that as humans, we are all individual and unique, but we aren't that different. And we tend to make the same mistakes and decisions over and over and over again. And, you know, using the book has been like a safe way where no one was injured in the making of the story for us to grapple with those things.
Yeah. I think in terms of I Am Made of Death feeling very now, this is, you know, a very large theme in the book is body autonomy and the ability to make your own decisions surrounding your medical choices, specifically as a woman. And I think that is extremely, you know, unfortunately relevant right now. And, you know, Vivian is a character who every moment of her day is controlled from the moment she wakes up to the moment she goes to bed, the amount of calories she eats, where she's going, who she's seeing, who she's talking to, and controlled by her stepfather. So she has a older male influence, you know, making sure she's behaving in a way that is perceived as correct to behave in and socially acceptable and proper. And the story is her breaking free of that and advocating for herself, regaining her voice, and, you know, making her own decisions for her well-being and her health. And I do think that seeing someone, specifically a female character, sort of sticking a big giant middle finger up to, you know, the powers that be, feels very good at a time like this.
Thank you, thank you. You have your books. Can you talk about your thoughts about the covers?
Yeah.
And just, they say don't judge a book by a cover, but
Yes.
these are really great covers.
Yes.
So I'm curious to hear what you all think.
Yeah. We love this cover. Like, honestly, we went through some different versions where at first it was going to have like a girl on the cover. We were figuring out like, are we going to add some like, oh yeah, I guess we should be holding up. If we should have some like Miami elements because it takes place in Miami. But then when, you know, this is like some of the business decisions that folks make in the industry, they're like, okay, what can we do to help it appeal to a wider audience? So even if you are not YA per se, or you are young at heart, you could still want to pick up the book. And this is just so really great. And also, like, it has these pearls with blood on it, symbolizing eating the rich. And if you pay attention and see closely at the bottom, there is a tooth at the very end. And I love that little detail. It's like a nice little surprise.
I didn't notice that until just now.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love my cover, how it came out. It sort of does a little bit of both. It has the ballerina vibes with the fraying ribbon, you know, very symbolic of Vivian sort of unraveling. And it looks a little bit like a butterfly, a little bit like a rib cage. You're not really quite sure, but it's kind of got that bubblegum horror feel where everything is, you know, pink and silk, and then you look a little closer and it's just some rib
Got some
cage.
gore.
Yeah.
Awesome, very good. We have time now for some Q&A, so come on up.
Come on down. We watch a lot of
Price is Right.
Game Show Network.
Hi. Oh.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you so much for speaking to us today. I was really interested in hearing your thoughts behind picking the ages that you did for your characters, and maybe even specifically in horror, what does it mean for younger readers to have a character that, like, you know, bites back in terms of both of your books, like
Yeah.
the significance of the ages in both your stories?
Yeah.
Well, that's good. Yeah. Brielle is 17. We like 17 because of that song, Edge of 17.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, not yet a girl, or not a girl, not yet a woman.
Yes, that's also good. But it's a great age to, like, you know, you're on the cusp of, you know, legal adulthood, but you're also like still in your world of being a kid, being in school, but you're about to like do exciting things. You're going to graduate. Are you going to go to college? Are you going to do something else? Like, are you in accord with what your parents are envisioning for you? That sort of thing. So like adolescence is just an interesting just developmental stage for a person to tackle. And then also, like, you have more independence, like Brielle has a job and she is out there doing things. But, you know, like, being the children of immigrants, like Haitian, like they weren't letting us do anything like that. So like, just some of the, yeah, just some of
L'école, l'église, la caille, which means school, church, and home.
yeah. And like that was like in the book, like Brielle, she goes on a trip, and it's very fun and exciting to write, like, you know, and like it was great, but like she also had to deal with the ramifications of her Haitian mother hearing that she was traveling outside of the country and doing all of these things that were not sanctioned. Yeah, like you could talk about horror.
Oh, you know, 17, like Marita said, is that precarious age, but also young adult fiction is fun. It's so fun. Like, you know, I read everything. I read nonfiction, fiction, adult, you know, women's fiction, whatever. And young adult will just like keep you turning the page. And it's just fun to be able to grapple with very scary things. And I think there's also this misunderstanding sometimes that young people are not aware of the world around them, or that there's this level of protection that, yes, is required, but without necessarily speaking to the young person to get their input. And so it was really good for us to have Brielle as this character who's like grappling with what she wants in addition to what her mom and family want for her.
If I'm in a similar age bracket. It's a little bit older in the sense that Vivian is leaving home for college at the end of the summer, and Thomas, the male protagonist, is a college dropout from his first semester in school. And I wanted to explore from his perspective the idea of maybe college wasn't the choice for him, and maybe there's something else to do than the path he's had set out for him. So I wanted to give both him and Vivian, the uncertainty of, we have parents who have put pressure on us to, you know, achieve these things, and maybe that's not what I want to achieve with my life. And if that's the case, where do I go from here? And I think that's that age is the time when you're asking those questions, like, what's next? I'm at this fork in the road. Do I, you know, do plan A or plan B, and what brings me fulfillment? And it's something that both of them are exploring.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
Both of these books seem to do a really great job of representing different groups that might not always get a lot of visibility in media and literature, which is awesome. And y'all have already spoken to the fact that you take a lot of inspiration from real life, from your own experience, from research. I'm curious in the creative process how you kind of narrowed that in and balance that line of wanting to represent your groups and maybe making that very accessible to all experiences that you've heard about from people that are like y'all, versus being ultra specific to your own experiences and making a character very believable and very unique.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good question. For me, I know I love writing banter right off the bat. And so I was it was kind of a challenge that I didn't anticipate, writing myself into a corner in this sense when I wrote a character who is mute, because there was no banter happening. But I still, you know, there's a romance, and I still had to make the two characters, you know, have enough chemistry on page that they fell in love. And so I was diving into that from a craft perspective, but I was also trying to, you know, represent the sign language on page, because my own relationship with sign language as a deaf person has been very fraught, a lot of positives and negatives, having grown up not having access to it until later in life. And so I wanted to write on the flip side a character who has had access to it, but it's the only thing she has, and sort of explore the deaf community that I have been in my whole life. At the same time, you know, deafness is not a monolith. There's lots of different experiences, and at the end of the day, I can only write my own, but and do the best that I can to write my own, and hope that it opens the door for so many more deaf authors to come forward and write their own, you know, walk and experience with it. But I did, you know, do a lot of research and work with friends of mine and colleagues of mine who sign much more fluently than I do, because that is an experience that wasn't necessarily my own.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, you know, there is a balance, you know, where you're thinking, oh, this is, you know, especially like writing a main character, Black girl, who is sometimes unlikable. What does that mean when you have this character who makes these decisions that folks might not necessarily agree with? And there's certainly a responsibility that comes with that, but ultimately we know a few things. One, we want to tell an entertaining story, and two, humans are so messy. And so incorporating that into the story feels very true to form because that's just who we are as a species. I actually just started listening to this podcast called very aptly, Our Ancestors Are Messy. And in the most recent episode I listened to, they were talking about Zora Neale Hurston and Langston Hughes and how they started off as friends and then ultimately became bitter enemies where they each died without having spoken to each other. And there was so much drama in between and I was like, I didn't know any of this. And so, you know, when we're writing the stories, like, you know, you can't expect that every experience is going to be encapsulated in this one story. And that's, you know, to Kelly's point, the opportunity for us to have like more Black women authors, more Haitian authors, Haitian American, Haitian from the island, like your viewpoint that you have is always going to be a little bit different and it just helps bring a level of clarity. And that's why we need like more and different stories too. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you guys so much for being here. I wore my most bubblegum
Yes.
outfit that I could. So I wrote this question down as you were speaking, and then I didn't realize that, oh, wait, it has a spoiler in it, and I don't want to spoil I Made of Death. So I'm going to try and rework this a little bit. So in horror, and as a baby horror, I really appreciate the way that y'all have written this. I have unfortunately not read The Summer Ate the Rich yet, but I will be buying it downstairs. So I guess my question is, in horror, there is oftentimes like a moment where a character snaps. The way that you wrote those scenes, if you had one, I know Miss Andrew, you have, but when that snap happens, I guess what compelled you to write it the way that you did, if that makes any sense?
No, that makes sense.
Rewrite.
So what compels you to write the moment that the character has their breaking moment?
Yes.
I think, you know, sort of like the name of this panel, you know, don't corner me, I bite. And, you know, I think we write these characters into a corner where, you know, we were talking about characters being messy and characters being flawed and characters not only always making the right decision and giving them the space to do that, but we also, I think that humanizes the characters to a point where when they do snap, you have to write it in such a way that the reader is then cheering them on. Like, go ahead, do all the wrongs. Like the I support women's wrongs meme.
Yes.
You know, and I think that if you write a character who is messy and flawed and ooh, I'm dropping my things. If you write a character who is messy and flawed and human and relatable, when they do have that moment, that cathartic snap, you'll just have people in their corner who are like, you can do no wrong, I support you, you know, get your revenge.
So like, you know, in The Summer Ate the Rich, Brielle has this like kind of ongoing thing that is pushing her to the edge, and then like a big thing that is spoilery.
Yeah, sorry about that.
It's okay.
Not think this through.
That happened, and she kind of like has this reset moment, and then she comes back and she's like, oh, you know,
It's on.
So yeah, it's just, you hope that you've done a good enough job, like Kelly says, to have that reader on that journey with you and be like, let's go. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm short.
Hi.
Hello.
So to continue the string of questions that may be difficult to answer without spoilers, something that I feel like we see in horror a lot is the idea of that CGI monster. You have all this buildup and then you have an ending that like may or may not fit the rest of the story. How and when did you know how to end your book?
That word count. I was like,
I like that.
but no, that's good. How do we know? I think I have had to, as a perfectionist, have to be like, all right, this is the book right now. Okay, it's gone through very many edits. If there's a typo that is on this page, it deserves to be there because it fought to the bitter end. Okay. But then also, I think like there's a point in the story where I feel like for all of the 3 books that we've published, it leaves on a note that everything is not so perfectly tied because that's not how life works. And so we felt like where we ended it was a point where it is a point of possibility.
Yeah.
And the reader can decide, oh, is Brielle going to do this or will she do that? But you've gotten enough of her as a character that it will inform your decision, and then you have a good debate with your friends to see who wins. Yeah.
I think, so I said we were talking about plotters and pantsers earlier, and I am a pantser in the sense that I do fly by the seat of my pants, write in Discovery, write my way to the end, but I do write the end first. Ooh. So of all of my books, I know, it's kind of like when you know you're trying to get somewhere. I know the location I'm going, I just don't know what roads I'm going to take to get there. And I have to make a lot of corrections along the way, but I do know where I'm going. And so I have hundreds of pages on the cutting room floor for all of my books, but the endings have always stayed the same from the first draft.
Wow. That's
so I think for me, I know, but I do have to then go back in and cut everything out of the middle.
Yes.
So a word count does get me in the end.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
Hi, how you doing?
Hello.
I haven't had a chance to read your novels yet. I'm definitely going to go into. I'm really not a horror type person, but I'm new to the writing game. I'm writing fiction.
Yes.
And I want to digress and ask you more about the mechanics of your writing. When you develop characters, how much backstory do you give them before you put them down in print?
Yeah.
And do you make it like an Excel spreadsheet and you just list all this information that you can then go in and pull out to say, oh, this is going to be great for this person. I need him to be able to do this, and things like that.
Yeah.
There are so many different ways that you can like write a story and know who your characters are. Like I know we were on tour with Angeline Bully, and the author Firekeeper's Daughter, and she was saying that she has like this extensive outline, like Excel sheet where she knows what's happening with her characters that she isn't even writing about in that chapter. She just is like, she knows what's going on, and we're like, oh, that's so cool. We're not gonna do that, But like, you could like, practically carry them that way. Think about like how a character's actions now on the page is a result of like past things. You could like kind of like retroactively come up with those reasons as you are writing, so it makes sense. Like Maika and I have an idea of like who our characters are before we start writing, but we dig deeper and add more to that layering as we go on. So like when we're going back and reading the other things, we're like, oh, that's good. Yeah, that's a nice one. Yeah.
Yeah. We also will create Pinterest boards sometimes where we'll be like, okay, what does her hair look like? What kind of clothing does she wear? What are the colors that we envision in this scene? So we'll have like a visual representation of it. And then it also depends on the book. So like our first book, our main character, for some reason, came to us fully formed, the both of us, even though, we are two separate people. But we both had a very clear idea of who she was. And for the book that we're working on now, book 4, we've created 2 columns, and we're like, okay, this is the main character. This is like the next important character. What's driving them? What's happening with their family? And because we also like to incorporate history, we'll just read a lot of things from, previous times to help inform the decisions. And there will come a point where you have so much information that you're like, this can't come into the story. But we've done one of 2 things. Like sometimes, I remember for our second book, we had to figure out when were seatbelts added to cars, because they were going on a cross-country road trip and it was taking place back in time. So we were like, oh wait, would she turn and put her seatbelt on? And then, we go down this rabbit hole. And then ultimately, for that book in particular, we had so much extra information that we made like a 3-part mini podcast to help put in the rest of the information that we didn't put into the story, because we were like, well, we did all this work, so.
Everybody has to know now.
Exactly.
I do think you learn about the characters as you go. It's hard to know what their individual arc is going to be until you're fleshing it out and putting them in these scenarios. But for me, I've never opened an Excel spreadsheet, and for my books, I think it would make my brain explode. But I do keep a birthday Bible, and that is I pick the character's birthday based on what I feel early on that their horoscope would be, their zodiac sign.
That's good.
And then I meticulously research what the personality traits of and romance compatibility and friendship compatibility, and likes, dislikes of that particular zodiac sign. And I make their little entry in my birthday Bible. And then whenever I come to a crossroads in the story, I'm like, how would a Scorpio respond to this moment? And then that's what they have to do. I'm locked in. That's where we go.
I love
So
that.
I do
That's so
find that
good.
helps me
Yeah.
to sort of figure them out.
Yeah.
Terrific, thank you.
Thank you.
I feel like we've had that by mistake, where like we'll go back and read and we'll be like, oh, she is giving Cancer. And it's like because,
Follow me, even if you don't know.
yes.
Hello.
Hello.
I am also a student at Howard under.
Yes, HU. You know.
You know, yes.
Okay.
And my question is, so we know within books such as Dread Nation, there's often consequences for the main character who is not the monster.
Yes.
What is the consequence for your books for characters who are the monster, who live in that space? What does that look like?
The consequence for the monster.
It's tricky without spoilers.
I know.
I will say, and we kind of touched on this earlier about, the true monster and the monster.
Yes.
Like, who is the monster and the real monster in the story, I think comes up in both of our books. And I try, when I read a lot of monsters into all three of my books, and in the context of the story, the monster is sort of like the T-Rex from Jurassic Park, where, yeah, it's scary, yeah, there's a lot of teeth, but the monster is just doing
What the
what
monster
the monsters do. And the real monsters, who are yet to be revealed, get their comeuppance in ways that I will not spoil, but they do have a different outcome than your typical
Yes.
creature.
Yes. Oh, you want to go or? Okay. Well, for our character, because Brielle is a black girl, we thought about this. We're like, okay, if someone found out what she was doing, she would be in a lot of trouble. And so we were debating what type of consequences she would have. And we made some decisions without spoiling it, but we made some decisions based on, we're like, we know what could happen, but this is what we want to happen. And that was very intentional on our part. And I do think, like, to what Marita was talking about earlier, just based on, the package that you come in, you can do the exact same thing, and the consequence that you face will be much harsher if you are lower ranking in the social hierarchy, right? And so we made decisions as the authors of this book and as black girls that we stand by. So we'll just leave it at that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to thank you all, but could we give a big hand for our...
This is so fun. They did a great job, Carrie.